Hello, everyone, and thank you, Ashwini, Minu, and everyone from IPN. Very quickly, I also put a slide together just so I can introduce myself. Just repeating what Ashwini said, I worked for 4 years in corporate consulting at McKinsey and Company, after which I moved to the nonprofit world, the development world, working at People, a nonprofit that works in education that some of you know as part of the leadership team. And about a year ago, I moved on to a career break that I have been on, where I wanted to take some time to ask the big questions, to spend a little bit of time working on things that I found exciting, but usually don't get time for. And as part of that, ended up starting Raahi.impact, which on one side, we um, will see the benchmarking effort that has gone on. There is the compensation and benefits benchmarking that I had the pleasure of coordinating across 100 organizations. And there is also a travel policy benchmarking because what is the reimbursement per kilometer was a question that HR professionals kept asking every 3 months in one of the WhatsApp groups that I'm on. So we decided to just answer that question for now. Beyond this, as Ashwini mentioned, a large part of what Rahi has been about is a video podcast because all of us have, everyone on this call has careers in social impact. There are some people like me who move from the corporate space to the development space and engage here. And a few years in, I felt like there are some of these questions that I have around what impact really means. What is the point of us trying to drive social change? And how do we make our life choices in a way that is in line with our values? Keeping all of this, I ended up starting Rahi Impact Journeys, a video podcast. And over the last few months, have been having very interesting conversations with a wide range of people. There is a Padma Vibhushan awardee who I spoke to with 60 years of a career, and how did he make his choices? Professors who have worked through different research pieces, and so on. And most recently, an explainer on what climate change actually is. Let's get going. What we hope to achieve is to orient you to the idea of what is compensation benchmarking. And on one side, there are the benefits of doing compensation benchmarking, but on the other side, I think as we go through the session, we will also appreciate that there are limitations. There are things that we have to be careful about. And most importantly, the simple point that it boils down to what is your decision, your context, and your journey as an individual and as an organization. So what we will do is primarily go through this. You see the image at the bottom left. Some of you may have seen it, others may not have seen the report, and I will share the link right now so that you can also download it and take a look at it even as we speak. It's a report that was created and launched a few months ago. So I want to just quickly start in the first 5 to 10 minutes on the background of the report, then get into actually taking you through the report so that we can look at it collectively and answer certain questions that you might have. Now, obviously, please don't think that it will be possible for us in this time to understand the full 60, 70 page report. But ultimately, it will be helpful for you to then engage with it and understand it in the right context. And finally, let's talk about what are the reflections that are coming out. You can pick up the report at this link. I wanted to make sure that you also have it with you in case you want to refer to it, because we'll be moving through it a little quickly. Along with the report, to make life easier and to make sure that we all have an overview, I have also put out a video, a 20-minute video, which gives the overview and guidance around how to read the report. Today, we are going to be going deeper on it. So let's get into things. First, a quick background on this report so that we can figure it out in its context properly. So 2 years ago, when I was still with People, this was a chat that happened on a WhatsApp group. We wanted a compensation benchmark. And at that point, there was nothing available in there was no recent benchmark that was available. So on this group, there was a conversation saying, hey, listen, does anyone have a benchmark? And if they don't, should we just do a plan B? Because pretty much everyone who will get benchmarked is on this group. So should I just put a survey together and you could fill it and then we could just get the results? I'm happy to take the effort of analyzing the data. There was a lot of support, and we ended up 2 years ago doing a benchmarking, which led to 64 organizations sharing their data with me. and me processing it confidentially and sharing back aggregated insights to the participants. This was near October, November 2022. Suddenly, in 2023, people started messaging saying, hey, are we doing this again? It would be helpful if we can do the benchmarking. So we did it again. And this time there was more momentum, more support, and we had 100 organizations that participated. What makes this special and something that's close to my heart is that this benchmarking report that was created was not owned by any one person. The effort was community driven. I had the pleasure of coordinating it, but the inputs to what the survey should have were taken from organizations, and 100 organizations shared their data to then create a report. And finally, many of them wrote in to say, listen, this is super useful. Can we try to figure out a way to make this public so that other people can also find it useful? And so what we did is we created a participant report. And after that, with permission from everyone, there was also the public report that was created, which all of you on the call have access to, the link that I sent, which has most of the important views, but some elements missing, which may be also useful to incentivize continued participation and reduce free ridership. And so if any of your organizations would like to participate in this year's upcoming survey, which most likely we will be doing in a few months, we please just drop a quick email to me at Raahi.impact@gmail.com. And we'll make sure that you are also informed at the point that the survey is launched. So what was the process by which we approached the survey? Step one, there was an initial set of people who joined in. And after the first 5, it's easier. The first 5 for me are the heroes, because when there is nobody else who shared their data, they take a step and they share it. After the first 5, you say, okay, 5 people have joined, and then that becomes 10. 10 have joined, becomes 20. And surprise, surprise, we reached 85 and finally 100 through a series of outreaches that happened. Then what that actually meant is on the form, folks filled in their data. There was 3 broad sections. First is, tell me about your organization. What is your budget? Where do you operate? What sectors do you work in, et cetera, to help understand what org it is. Then there was a section which looks like this. This is a screenshot that I have put, which is, tell me what for the different levels, if I simplify an organization, the titles are different, but typically this is the hierarchy that you see. You've got the CEO or founder or director. Then you've got the department leads. Then you've got the tenured managers or the senior manager, junior manager, senior associate, junior associate, and field associates. In many of the organizations that we had, this seemed to be the structure. So we just put that out and said, look, give me the years of experience if possible. What is the minimum, maximum, and average salary, most typical salary that you offer for this role? All of this is self-reported, and all of this has been, the idea of this was not to get 100% accurate answer. The idea was to get, like it says, a dipstick idea. Quickly just getting a check. Because the point, as you saw in the previous slide, is first that it's community driven. Second, that it's rapid. If you look at the timelines, the outreach and the survey filling happened in October, November 2023. And the participants received the report in December. And 3 months later, the public report was launched. So that it was also, I also had to take permission from all the 100 organizations to make the public report. Hence, there was further delay that happened. But essentially, in a matter of weeks for the organization, they received the results and enabling them to take their decisions. And this is the report that we'll be going through, this year's public report. And separately, as many of you know, there are other compensation benchmarking reports also available. Many of you may have heard of this. There is one by ISDM, CSIP in short, and Korn Ferry. They work. The link to this will be at in the last slide of my report. Mission Millions is another one that was run by GuideStar, which focused more on rural and grassroots organizations, giving a very interesting perspective. The idea was to say India's independence, it has been 75 years. And they wanted to make the point that the sector has been contributing immensely to the society's building. And they felt that this report will help highlight the sort of livelihoods and support that NGOs are providing. So these are two reports that would be useful. But let's get into this particular one. If I look at it, just to repeat, it's Dipstick, a quick sense meant to cover compensation and benefits. What I will do now is walk through the report. Please, I have tried to make it as simple as possible so that you can follow the flow. Do not try to look for 100% clarity right now. And please do not try to identify the data point that you really need right now. You have the report. Everything that I'm going to show you is public. The point of this is to make it easier for you to understand it and get a broad sense so that 80 pages is not too much as you engage with it. Of the 80 pages, only 5 pages actually matter to your organization for its particular type. There are 5 parts to the document that you have. First is an overview section, which gives the context about how this exercise was done, which I just shared with you, and context about Raahi and why this is set up, and how to read the report, which we will go through very quickly. Then it gets into the core of the report, which first says that this is the participant profile. The 100 organizations that we have, this is the overview of the organization so that you can see, is this relevant for you? Are these the organizations that you can relate to? And does this make sense for you? Then gets into the compensation benchmarks, which is in the report that you have, it gives you the cut by budget size of organization, which is to say 0 to 5 lakh, 5 to 50 lakh, 50 to 50 lakh to 1 crore, 1 crore to 3 crore, so on till 50 to 200 crore. Let me tell you what the benchmarks look like. What is there in the participant report is also additional information, including what is the median and mode salaries, what is the leadership salary as a percentage of the budget, and new cuts, including by geography and by years of operation, and a few case studies. There were some organizations which didn't suit the benchmarking, which were very different. For example, there was one social enterprise that also filled the data. There was one organization that was so new that they were just one person at that point. So those information have been covered as case studies in that. Now, after compensation, which is salary related questions, there is the other one, which is around benefits. I know that many of you on the call have come here looking for answers to your questions around what salary to give. But personally, I think that the benefits benchmarks is the underrated section. It was beautiful and inspiring to see the different types of benefits that different organizations offer. And that gives a lot of idea around what could suit in your context and that you could do. So in that section, there is also what is the increment percentage that organizations are planning to give their employees. As you know, this was done late last year. And so in the December to March, April period, it is useful to know what the increments planned for 2024, 2025 are. And finally, there is a section on the closing thoughts. There are acknowledgements to be given to a lot of people who helped make this initiative happen, links to the other benchmarking reports, to Raahi.impact journeys, etc., and a pay as you wish. Because it took 80 hours to put this entire report together, many people in the sector also suggested that there should be some way to compensate for that time and effort. And so as part of that, I had put out a pay as you wish. If anybody, any organization or individual would like to support such initiatives creating public resources, they had the option to do that. So this is the overview of the report. What we're going to do now very quickly is go through each of these sections. In the context section, this is what I have to really emphasize to you when you look at the data. This is the section around the benefits and the limitations of benchmarking. First, we've tried our best to make sure that the data is accurate and verified, but it's important to remember that it is self-reported, which means that the CEO forwarded the message to the finance lead, who forwarded it to the finance associate to fill the data, and they filled the data and shared back. Many times I got back to them saying, hey, listen, can you just clarify on this detail? And a lot of data changed. So maximum effort has been taken. However, I just think it's important, especially when it comes to leadership salaries, which are usually more hotly contested or closely guarded. You may see slightly deflated numbers, perhaps. And it's very hard to compare organizations beyond a point. So sometimes they fill the data, but they didn't have the space to explain that it was a part-time employee that was there. And of course, like I shared, this was created with the networks that was there of the participating organization. So people posted, I posted, people reposted, people reposted. So you will also see that there is a little bit more bias towards education organizations because that's the network that I had. And second, remember that this document was, made with a lot of love and care. But in case there's something missed, I don't think there is anything. Please write to me if you find that there is any gap there. And for the organizational leaders on the call, really important that this is about your strategy. Nothing in this should alarm you. It should inform you. It should inspire you to try different things. But ultimately, you're in the organization for the judgment that you are making. And so please do not take this report as gospel truth. For those who are not part of the leadership team or HR, but who are part of the organization, looking at this report for your own personal journey and what it means for you, I would say be thoughtful on how you use the report. Compensation is a complicated, complex topic, and every organization leader tries their best to make things work for everyone in their organization. But it usually takes time to correct things, and it's also not as straightforward as it looks in this report. Therefore, just keep in mind that the best way that you could use the information in this report is to engage in a constructive dialogue with your organization so that you can help build a better, stronger culture. Now, as I shared, this is the list of organizations who participated in the survey. There are some organizations who, for various reasons, said, look, I would prefer that my name is not public. And that was also an option. So in this case, there are some other organizations as well. However, this is the list who were comfortable with their name going out. We'll give you 30 seconds to look through it, to look for familiar names. And if none of these are people who seem to be anywhere close to the sort of work you do, maybe this report is not as relevant for your organization. So what we have in the report in the participant profile is 3-4 different cuts of the types of organizations so that we have a good sense around whether they are comparable, what we are looking at. Broad story coming out is that we have a good spread of organizations across budget categories. 50% of them say that they work in school education. Sometimes that includes those who say they work in something else. The sectoral cut didn't work very well this time because you know how it is, right? Everyone likes to say that they work in everything. And so they ticked multiple boxes. And so it wasn't very clear after a point. And most of the organizations are 0 to 25 years old and have less than 125 employees. You can see on the graph on the bottom right, the number of employees on the x-axis and the number of years on the y-axis of the participants. All of this is there in detail in the document. I ran through these 3 slides. Now, coming to the compensation benchmarks, there are 4 types of tables that you will see. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of the tables before we even get into the data. There are 4 tables. First table is just a pure table where I realized that graphs are a little complicated for people to sometimes understand. So I just put all the data into a simple Excel sheet format. So you can see that you've got the leadership team, which is CEO, CXO. You've got the program teams, senior manager, junior manager, senior associate, junior associate, field associate, and the support or the organization teams, which is finance manager, finance associate, fundraising manager, fundraising associate, M&E manager, M&E associate, and HR manager, HR associate. These were the different roles that were asked this time, right? And you have 8 pages in the report which talk about each of these. So first page is about, let's say, 0 to 0.5 or 0 to 50 lakh organizations. The page that you're seeing here is 50 lakh to 1 crore organization, and so on, right? In terms of budget size. The second type of graph that was created is we have all the budget sizes on the x-axis. You can see 5 lakhs to 50 lakhs, 50 lakhs to 1 crore, 1 crore to 3 crore, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 50, and 50 to 200. This is the categorization that was done. And it was done in a way that you have decent number of organizations in every section. So you can see there are 4 organizations, the little gray bubble, 4 organizations that are of the first category, 7 of the second, 14 of the third, 16, so on, right? The 100 breaks down this way. And the colors that you see are the different roles. So, for example, the CEO salary, CEO, executive director, or founder is the deep blue, the teal color that you see. Then comes the CXO, and so on. This is the way to read the graph. So, for example, if you are an organization that has a 4 crore budget and you want to look at it, you will focus on the 3 to 5 crore section. And there you'll see, okay, the CEO gets on average 23 lakhs per annum. The field associate gets on average about 3.2 lakhs per annum based on the data that is available, right? You will look at the different levels over here. Now, this you will see is only for the leadership and program teams. Because we simplified for the support teams, because usually in all the organizations I had seen, they don't have such a complex hierarchy in the support teams. So simply it was there is a manager role and associate role. Here it was a simpler graph where we looked at manager and associate for each of them. Similarly, you have the budget on the x-axis, number of organizations below that, and the manager associate there for each of the 4 functions that was evaluated. And finally, this is the most complicated looking graph, but also the most useful graph, and it's really simple at the heart. The thing is, for each of the roles, what we did is sometimes, this average is not enough. Average is you know how it is, right? You need average and standard deviation. You need average and a sense of the variability. So the same averages that you saw in the table, the same averages that you saw in the graph, the bar graph, the averages are there in bold over here. For example, we spoke about the field associate, which is the bright blue that you see. The field associate for a 4 crore organization, you will see that the average is still 3.2, the little X that you are able to see. But along with that average, you are able to see that of the 14 people who gave, the lowest salary that was given for a field associate was 1.8 lakhs per annum. And the highest salary actually was given 8 lakhs per annum. And it may also happen that that organization doesn't separately have field associates. They only have project associates and they don't differentiate between the two. That might be why, but it was useful to show you, I felt, the variability along with the averages. So the definition of each of these roles, what tenured means, in this case, in this time, was left to understanding of the people, right? The problem that we face, also answering what Dr. Tatiana has put on the chat, the problem that we face is that in different organizations, the titles are very different. For example, an organization has the highest program category as program manager. But I know another organization where program manager is the entry role or project leader is the entry role. So the terms became confusing. What we plan to do for this year's cycle is to actually include a question saying, what is the title that you are putting for this role? Many people were not able to reliably answer, or many people left blank the question around how many years of experience do people in this role typically have? To repeat, the idea was to give a quick dipstick sense. It was not to be authoritative, because usually the belief is that when management takes decisions, it is often with imperfect information. And if we are chasing perfect information, it'll have to be a much more detailed and specific effort. And we can't go broad. We'll have to go deep on a particular piece of the puzzle, right? It would need a lot more bandwidth, both from the organizations providing it as well as from the analysis side. And just a reminder that this entire piece of work was done by a single person without anyone else having seen the raw data that is made available, right? That's been the background for this. So you will find these 4 types of graphs that are there in the 4 sections that are there in the compensation benchmark. Someone
Hello?
has unmuted. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a question. It is basically you have classified it on various the benchmarks on various categories. Have you also tried to classify it based on the geographical distribution of NGOs?
Yes. So there is also a section of the report which looks at where do you work, urban, rural, semi-urban, and multiple choices between these. That
Mhm.
result is available in the participant report. So
Okay.
that is not there in the public report because this seemed to be the most useful. While the point is, we did want it to be inclusive. The first year that we were doing it, somebody said that the weather in Delhi and Mumbai um, it determines the climate of India, right? And we didn't want that to be the case. So we asked, where is your headquarters also? We asked, where do you work as well, right? So we'll get more nuanced next time. For example, if somebody works to get tribal students to study in schools in the city, they will tick both tribal and urban. So then that
Mm.
gets confusing. So there are issues like that when you actually get down to the analysis. So text cycle, we'll have to solve for that. But yes, there is a cut based on geography and on years of operation. There was also a table saying for each role, if you're an early stage org versus a 20-year-old org,
Mm.
what is the difference in salary? So it was giving different views of the same thing so that you could see what was most useful for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. So I hope that you've gotten a sense of how to analyze it. Like you said, like we discussed, there is the table. There is the overview graphs, which gives the averages. Just on this one, just so you don't get confused, there is also a second graph that I've created, which is flipping the view that we will talk about. Um, what we did is instead of having the budget on the x-axis, we had the different roles on the x-axis in decreasing order of seniority. And we looked at how does the salary change as your budget increases, which brought a very interesting perspective, but we will talk about it in a little bit. Um, we have the deep dives. It's given for leadership as one page, for the managers another page, and for the associates as the third page. And similarly for the org functions for finance, fundraising, M&E, etc., each of them has a different page. If you look at the org functions, one insight that I found helpful, especially for those of you who have smaller organizations in terms of budget, as you know, it's true across the sector that it is only after you cross a certain critical size of organization that you start having a dedicated team. And you also find that the CEO or founder salary for these small organizations actually on average are lower. Why is that? In many of the participating organizations, they were doing it pro bono or part-time because it is still very, very early for them. So the person has asked how much can the fundraising head get paid for a 4 crore NGO? Let's take a 4 crore NGO. Like before, we look at the 3 to 5 budget size. There are 8 organizations that have given their data. And let's see, you've got the brown as the manager and the blue as the associate. So the manager, not defined as head, etc., have anywhere between 4 lakh per annum to 18 lakh per annum. But if I average that detail across, there is about, it comes to about 9.8 lakh, right? While this, like the most that an associate gets paid is 9 lakhs and 3 lakhs is minimum and the typical is therefore 5.6. So I hope that helps as an example. This is on the compensation part, and this is what a lot of you originally were coming for. I would really want you to spend time with me on the benefits part because I find it incredibly useful and refreshing to see some of those ideas. Left in a lot more of the benefits report than on the compensation side because I just thought it's super useful for people to see and it's a non-competitive thing. Now coming to the second part around the benefits benchmarks, right? So there was a question, just so you get the context, the question asked was to say, okay, across these benefits, yes or no, or maybe, and can you share more detail around what is there? And then there was a question saying, other than all of this, are there any more benefits that you think others should know about that you are proud of or that are interesting? And so taking all of that information, reading through all of it, this report was created. This was not done through ChatGPT, though ChatGPT was available at that time. The idea was to make sure that we really understand the essence. And with that essence of what was written, the synthesis has been created, right? Here is the overall picture, and we will see these same graphs for each of them in the next slide. So I'm going to go into that because that might be useful. First, the header over here, this tab gives you, you can keep track of where you are in the document. So on annual leaves, of course, there is a significant variation that is seen around how leaves are approached. And leaves honestly require a completely different benchmarking of their own. But broadly, there are a set of primary leaves, which is earned leave, privileged leave, paid leave, casual leave, sick leave, etc. Then there are some special leaves like paternity, maternity, bereavement, or compassionate leave, and holiday leaves. Then there are some special leaves that are there, which is for organizational downtime, for year end. Some organization gave birthday leaves, wedding leaves, menstrual leaves, relocation leaves, exam leaves, etc. A few organizations also called out very interestingly that they have a flexible leave policy saying, look, we trust you. You can take whatever leaves you need and we will support you because we think of you as responsible adults who will take care of things. Now, that's an interesting approach. And what I think matters is ensuring that your entire organization system is aligned to that, right? Around carrying forward the leave, there is very different sort of approaches taken. Some said they don't, some said they do. Many of them seem to allow partial carry forward with time limits. But I didn't want to comment too deeply on this. Now, third is around leave encashment, that they do allow leave encashment with a cap. Broadly, the main practice seems to be no, we don't do leave encashment, at least these across these organizations. Now, Um, coming to the other types of leaves, I just added that in the public report because I thought that would be what could help inspiration. There is also adoption leave that somebody had given, which I thought was beautiful, going beyond the maternity and paternity leaves. Miscarriage leave was also explicitly called out, and so on. And now coming to the next piece around Provident Fund. Not too much story here. Most organizations seem to give the 1,800 and a few of them have added more detail. Coming to the gratuity, similarly, it seems to be largely driven by the law and ensuring that you are compliant, not a main topic of conversation. ESI also very similar story, which is saying those who are giving it seem to be doing per the eligibility of the law. Those who are not doing it say that it's not applicable for us, hence we are not doing it. And some also give additional information that I have included over here, right? Now, this is an interesting and useful one that might be of help for you. There was a section that we added this year called wellness allowance, saying, tell me what are the sort of wellness oriented benefits that are there. Putting together the detail across both the written comments and in the section, here's the story that's coming out. Around mental health support, a lot of organizations, or many organizations, I would say not a lot, are tackling this conversation around mental health and trying to provide support in whatever way that makes sense for their situation, including providing free mental health and mental well-being sessions for all team members, providing employee assistance program, specifically counseling for employees, providing financial assistance of up to 10,000 for therapy, and a therapy allowance of 1,500 per month for doing self-healing activities, as they called it. Second, rather than provide money and support directly, they also tie up with a provider to give this consultation for them. Third is they just give the money, an allowance which changes based on the organization. And you can see that it ranges from 3,000 all the way to 10,000 and 32,000, which is a health and learning incentive that is given. Now, another interesting piece is around the performance bonus. Now, the broader question was performance bonus. And what we find is mostly organizations don't really do performance bonuses. The way that they tackle performance management is by providing graded increments, a gradient of increments, and linking it to the performance appraisal cycle, saying I give you 5% if you're an average performer and 7% if you're a high performer sort of gradation, and not too much of performance-based pay in conversation. Along with this, just letting you know that the common increments that were provided were in the range of 7 to 12%. And most common number that you see is 10% if you ask for a single number. But if you read the comments, naturally, it is not a single number, right? You see that you have organizations. If you look at this graph, it's basically saying different organizations, whoever mentioned, I've put it into a graphical format. Many people have said they provide 10 to 15, 10 to 14, etc. Some people have said, this year it's going to be in a range of 3 to 8%, and so on, right? And on the other benefits, there was more detail, right? So they gave financial support for learning and upskilling, like interest-free loans. Of course, there was travel, relocation, communication, and this detail is provided in the participant report. Someone spoke about having budgets for team lunches, having 5 or 6 day work weeks, etc., etc. And L&D support was something that got a lot of call out. Yeah, and thank you, Jasmeet, for the comment. I'm glad that it was helpful for CreateNet to use the conversation around benchmarks for strengthening the organization. That's it on the benefits part. Just closing so that we can get to the reflections. This was the pay as you wish in case anybody had wanted to contribute. This was the detail that was provided. This was the detailed overview of how the story has gone to create this report. And these are the many, many, many people, I think a small set of the many people to thank for creating such a radical experiment in trust and collaboration that has gone well. It's, if you really think about it, it is people sharing their organization data and trusting that it will be taken care of and getting back benefit from it. So it is a win-win situation where nobody loses and everybody wins. And all it took was some amount of trust and quite a lot of effort. And we've got this going in a way that what was meant to be a one-time exercise is now an annual exercise that we hope to continue. Like I said, the last page of the report contains, the other initiatives under Raahi.impact, the podcast, and also something that'll be useful for HR folks on the call, which is the NGO travel policy, saying what is the policy typically for accommodation, et cetera, for travel reimbursement per kilometer. Do you reimburse electric vehicles? Is a question that somebody asked, which triggered this, and other benchmarking efforts that are there that you can look at. This is from September 2022. This is from something like March 2023. And finally, what does this mean? There is one slide that I wanted to call out. If I look at the roles and the salaries increasing by the budget size of the organization, if I remove all the detail, this is what the graph looks like, which is that as the budget size of the organization increases, you are able to see that the overall salary increases for the leadership team, not as much for the tenured managers, and really very little for somebody who's a tenured associate. Now, I am someone who really believes that it's super important what the leadership team does, and it absolutely makes sense to ensure that they are compensated, especially when many of them have taken a decision to change from a path that, leave the opportunities for financial compensation and choose this path. And given the fact that they have a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. And honestly, this entire page, nothing in this page will actually perhaps compare to certain equivalent organizations in terms of tier in the corporate world, where the salaries will be a very different order of magnitude. Now, the point that I wanted to help us reflect on is to say that benchmarking is something that is not a very straightforward thing. I could say that I want everyone's salaries to increase. There is a question of within the org, whose salaries should we be talking about? Should we talk about changing the salaries of, for example, a teacher or a nurse from 20,000 to 40,000, right? Instead of talking about 5%, 10% increment. Just because the entire market pays 20,000, is that actually what they should be getting? Conversation one. Conversation two, what happens if all of us increase our salaries based on benchmarking? Every other year, we do the benchmarking and we keep correcting for it and we keep just aligning to that salary benchmark. If at the same time our funding sources also don't increase, what may end up happening is that smaller organizations may be more at risk at not being able to attract talent. And the gap between the talent access between NGOs also may get affected. And the final point is to say that ultimately, should the conversation and should the reason that a lot of you came into the call, should it be around compensation only, but can we be mindful and keep the lens wider, looking at not just compensation, but also truly getting behind benefits that we can provide and making it happen. To Tanuja's question, it does not include data on the gender pay gap. It is also a very interesting and useful thing to look at. And it's also important to recognize that the Indian nonprofit sector might look very different from the American corporate sector. And so looking at what that, creating reports around it, I agree, Tanuja, would also actually be helpful. because we don't actually know what the reality is for the space that all of us occupy. Um, I think that's it from me. I just wanted to open it up first for questions. Let's take the time to have a meaningful discussion.
Hi. So basically, we are from the Nudge Institute, and we just want to understand like there are some skills, right, which could be like a premium skill in the market. For example, your monitoring and evaluation, or your gender expert, or someone like that. So, do you have an understanding of that as well? That and is that a part of this report?
What you have seen is the full report, right?
Got yeah.
So all that now you will find in the compensation section is different cuts of the different views that I've shown you. Again, the objective of the report, unfortunately, there are lots of nuances that happen across organizations. And my point of view with respect to this report was to prioritize accessibility, applicability, and readability, which is to say that people are actually able to understand what is written there, and use it meaningfully. Than, let's say, if I look at the more, how do I put it, the more proprietary sort of reports that are created for the sector, they
Hmm.
require intense focus to understand. So I would encourage you to check out the ISDM report, which I had gone through. It's linked at the last page of the compensation benchmark report. You will find that they have made a dashboard out of it also. It requires you to engage and understand at a deep level to be able to find use in that report, right? So agree with you, but it was that if I do that, then I'd have to take a few focus areas, saying, let's say only teachers, or therefore only education organizations, or let's talk about gender specialists, etc. But
Hmm.
noted, it might be interesting to see asking, are there any specialized roles which can get a premium? So
Hmm.
I would love for these inputs and your support in shaping this year's survey, right? Because this is being done not as a full-time job, it is being done as something that will help the sector. So
Okay.
we can shape it together.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, but that said, we took the uh, four support functions which are most commonly seen: HR, M&E, fundraising, and finance. Right?
Got it.
So
Okay. Thank you.
thanks, Shruti.
One more question. So I don't know, like when you were doing this exercise, were you also able to understand that when new incoming employees join the organization, is there compensation benchmarking based on a certain number in the organization? Do the organization generally pick median, or what do they pick in the not-for-profit sector, which may be very different to the for-profit world, right?
Yeah. And even within the non-profit sector, there are varying levels of sophistication that organizations have, right? Again, some of these questions, there are many questions that are helpful to understand.
Yeah.
This effort was entirely quantitative and offline in nature. The only input received was through the survey.
Hmm.
And the survey tried to be as focused as possible because already it was quite large in its scope. So separately, there is the idea that was done earlier and will continue of doing knowledge exchange sessions where people can just talk and discuss and share their ideas, and we synthesize that. So that was done a couple of times earlier. Maybe that would be more useful because rather than the question of what is typically done,
Hmm.
maybe what would help is to answer the question, how, what should we do? Right?
Hmm.
How should we think about this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the my personal there was also a very similar question saying how do you solve for tenure, etc. So broadly, maybe there are two things that people look at, right? One is to say what is the experience that you bring so far, and second is to say um what has been the performance in the interview.
Hmm.
And the third element of what is your performance in role comes in after you have joined the organization. So it is based on these three that typically at the basic level decisions are taken. Step two, organizations ideally and typically define pay bands, saying that this is the floor and the ceiling, and then you see how the person can rise. Question is, do you want to have overlapping pay bands so that you can justify readiness and yet not promoted? Or the other way around, do you want to have very distinct pay bands? So coming back to a lot of it will depend really on the core context of your org and the sort of people that you want to attract and the sort of people that you need for doing your organization's work, right? So
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I think those knowledge exchange sessions may be like a great idea. We would love
yeah,
to. Yeah,
super.
cool. Thank you.
All right.
Yes, hi Girish, thank you very
Hi.
much. It was very helpful. I wanted to understand from the benefits perspective, was there anything related to medical insurance provided by the organization?
There was. I don't remember how much detail is finally there in the public report. But generally, organizations did have most. I mean, the general story was that there is life insurance, accident insurance, and medical insurance that is there. If I remember right, the range was 3 to 5 lakhs, but it also was quite a variation. The most common figure seen was 3 to 5 lakhs, if I remember correctly. So,
Okay.
but
All
yes,
right.
so also there was a whole conversation to try and figure out what do we keep in the public report and what do we not, because we have a free rider problem, right? If everyone just waits for the public report, you have no data to create the report in the first place. And so, given it might become an annual exercise, we wanted to have added value because people took a risk and so they get reward.
Yeah. All right. Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ankit. So Pooja's put a question on the chat saying, are there reports that compare the Indian and international compensation benchmarking in the social sector? I am not personally aware of it. I'm not sure how useful it would be given purchasing power parity, but I am open for discussion on that. What is there? I know that the ISDM report that I have linked contains a comparison between the what they call GI, which is general industry. They have taken the average of the corporate world, I think, and compared that to the social sector and created that report. To remind you, the point of doing this was, again, the core point. If I say what is the one reason why we did this, it was to enable organizational leaders to make decisions around how much can and should they compensate and support, how can they support their employees the best. Because of that, it wasn't looking at can we create stronger narratives around the sector, which is what, for example, the Mission Millions report was looking at. They were trying to make the point around how valuable the social sector is for the country, right? And so the questions also will change. So I am in touch with both those teams. So this year, we will also be taking inputs and suggestions from them so that we can create a super strong benchmarking effort, which I hope all of you will join. Kritika has put a question on the chat saying salaries, travel and reimbursement, etc. reflects the role, location of work, the standard of living in the city, and the benefits the organization is willing to provide. The travel policy benchmarking, the question is, does it consider geography? The salary benchmarking, there was no separate participant version. Kritika, you can check out the travel benchmarking document on the same link. I did try to take the geography view, but what happened is, in general, the picture was not very different. Most of the organizations did not really call out too much, but wherever they did, it has been clarified specifically around the travel reimbursement and the nuances there around accommodation in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and so on. So please do check that out. I did a very quick dipstick, did not even publicize it. Just 30 organizations approximately participated, and we put out that report. And so I think that should still be helpful. Next question from Erica. Is there a benefit from this report that we would want to introduce in our organization? Is it possible for you to connect us to the organization who have implemented it so that we can learn, tweak, and introduce them, as creating policies take time so this can be leveraged? Absolutely. Please do write in to Raahi.impact@gmail.com. I will look at the raw data, see who has said it, and check with them if it's okay to connect you. And I will do the connection. Happy to do that. Beyond that, there is an idea in my mind, which I will take your guidance if it makes sense. A lot of people are asking for standard policies. I was wondering whether we should also create boilerplates under Rahi. So, which is like a base version, simple version of every type of policy, which you can then customize and it can be built by the community. Important thing, no free ridership. Please also contribute in making that, because the more people who add comments and shape it, the better, right? Yeah, thank you to Ankit, Jasmeet, Arati for the response. It's been on my mind for the last few weeks. We'll see if I can build that out.
Yeah, hi Girish, thank you. This is helpful. I want to understand, like, are there any different types of NGOs and like regional, international, any categories of NGOs? Does that also
Good
like
one.
kind of define like what kind of benchmark each one has?
Absolutely. So in the report, you have the list of all the organizations, most of the organizations, let's say 80% out of the 100 organizations who have participated. What that will give you is a good idea around who is there. Uh, Long story short, there was only one or two perhaps organizations that were like a India arm of an international org, but most of them have been, Indian organized or India started organizations which are not an India arm of a international org. That's the type of orgs that we primarily have. And again, I feel like the budget cut is quite useful if you look at the sizes, especially the really small, let's say 5 lakhs or 5 to 50 lakh sort of sizes. There are also interesting stories that I've tried to make sure is captured. Like I said, CEOs not actually taking full salary, which is why the average looks lower, or the fact that they don't have support teams. And trying to consolidate all those stories into one view is difficult because everyone's story is unique. So wherever I felt like it would be misrepresented, I have not made any analysis. Right. So I've tried to make sure whatever is out there, even if it is less, is proper. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thanks.
Deepesh has asked a question, which is there a thumb rule to differentiate the salary of the same level in for-profit and non-profit organizations? So personal opinion, I think it is tricky because how do you really compare apples and oranges? There are best-in-class organizations, both in the for-profit and the non-profit sector. And if you end up comparing a best-in-class non-profit to bottom of class for profit or middle of class for profit, salaries might even turn out that on all levels the non-profit is paying more than that organization. There was, in fact, recently there was a study on engineering salaries that was provided, and there was a whole discussion that some org leaders in education we were having. um, it's hard to compare and it's tricky. There is a question still open saying, are non-profit salaries higher or lower than for-profit salaries? Because what are the comparables is an important question that I don't know the answer to. I don't know if people have the answer to. I hope that answers, Deepesh. Feel free to come off mute.
Yeah. Hi, Girish. When somebody is onboarded into a organization, so some things are seen when it comes to, their compensation, right? For example, you mentioned the interview scores, what experience they bring in, right? But again, these are very quantitative things, right? But in terms of also judging in terms of the based of some of the qualitative aspects that they bring, right? Maybe some of the values that they bring, some of the commitment levels that they show. So should they also be sort of like bought into when we're thinking about compensation, or is it a very sort of like a dicey area and a gray area that cannot be sort of brought into this side of things?
Tricky question, but I would say that a lot of what you're saying is actually integrated into in ideal scenario, it is integrated into the interview process. Because typically when I say that you typically look at the previous experience and you look at their performance in the interview. When I say performance in the interviews, what I mean is usually what is the competence and what is the fit to role, right? Because you look at both competence and character in the interview. Now, can you turn it from an art to a science? Honestly, that depends, right? So in an early stage organization, typically I have seen that you are able to take more judgment calls around who you hire and how you compensate. And as organizations grow larger, there is a problem that if everything is left to individual decision making and not to process, there is the issue that you have two people who provide very different values, in terms of one might be really good with the team and keeping the team motivated, and someone might be really good with respect to getting work done, but they don't have a team at all, but they're both in the same role, say. uh, you would want to help both of them and compensate both of them properly. So it gets tricky if you try to turn it into a science. But I do believe that behind every number, because ultimately salary becomes a number, behind any percentages or absolute values that are put, the attempt is to try and turn a lot of that abstract into meaningful inputs that can be translated, and your performance management process reflects that.
Okay. And just a follow up to that, when you're interviewing the organizations or when you're collecting the responses, did you also get a glimpse of how do you approach performance appraisals and increments as to what the processes that they followed?
Broad story here, no? Two things. One, my understanding has been that you have two main things. One is performance and the other is behavior. And organizations typically choose between, do you incentivize performance or behavior or both? That's kind of what you were hinting at in your question, I feel.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's one. And usually it's a mix, and ideally it's a mix of what you value. And second, in terms of process, the process that I ended up always landing on is, and most useful I feel, would be self-reflection in some form, getting inputs from other people, and then having the manager or whoever else, having one person consolidate all these inputs, both the person's reflection and other people's reflection, into a synthesis, and engaging with them to have a conversation to improve. Now, this is when you are an organization that is focused on helping their employees grow, right? So you have to choose the point of your performance management. Is the point of the performance appraisal process to help your employees grow, and is the belief that you want to leave people stronger, and that is the best way you can do your job as an organization? And so this is the process that would get followed. Versus if your goal looks different, it is, let's say, short-term incentivization for whatever reason, then the process that you might follow would look different. You would just keep numbers. It would be less, when there is less variability across people and everyone is just like, for example, sales targets, right? Everyone is expected to sell the same water bottle. And so a sales target becomes very easy because the expectation of every person in the role is the same. But in a service role, in the sort of work that many of us end up doing, each person's role is actually different. The work that they do is different. It's not the same across geographies. So you end up going into what I shared, that sort of archetype, where you try to reflect on process, on performance and behavior, and try to build a process around evaluating and sharing that for stronger action.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
And just reading your chat, an experience to share from last year. We decided to do a scale of increments, with the leadership getting the lowest percentage and the junior most getting the highest percentage of increment. Came from the space of recognition of the number equivalent of the percentage and a cognition of the need. This is actually a very useful and important point. The thing is that when you do 10% increase on 10 lakhs versus 10% increase on 1 lakh, the actual number looks very different. And so organizations, and it is a beautiful practice to have for those who are getting, say, 1 lakh, you give them a 20% increment, versus those who are getting a 10 lakh, you give a 10%. And people understand when you share this. So it's about building the processes and building the transparency. There are two parts. One is there is the perceived fairness and there is the actual fairness. There is one piece of work that all of us will need to do on ensuring that we build systems that are fair. Then there is also work around communication to be done so that people understand that what has been done is fair, right? And that requires effort, that requires time, as all of us know. And it's hard to do it when, like, we know many times we are under-resourced and there is a lot going on. But I know we're all trying our best. Just want to say thank you to Minu, Ashwini, Ratish, and everyone else at Satwa for helping, for proposing and helping put this together. Yeah, thank you to everyone who stayed till now. In case you want to talk about anything, this is the email ID to just write to. I am available through a bunch of different ways over here. And finally, please do check out Raahi.impact journeys. It's been very useful for me to reflect on a lot around the social sector and what it means to try towards social change and make career choices and life choices. So I hope you will also enjoy it.